So I have the great honor of introducing two people who I just have tremendous respect and regard for, and I think we're all fortunate that they continue to be in the public arena. So first, I want to start with a woman who made history by becoming the first Latina elected to the California State Senate, where she served for a number of years before moving on to the House of Representatives. And Hilda Solis was in Congress for 8 years when she was tapped by President Obama to be the Secretary of Labor. And she served with President Obama for 4 years as Labor Secretary, and just last year has decided to come home. And she's not going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you that we have a seat opening up on the Board of Supervisors because of term limits. And I was just jumping up and down and actually trying to lobby Hilda before she decided she didn't want to be secretary anymore, lobbying her to consider to come back to California, come home, because we all needed her. And so I am so glad and feel very confident. We won't want to take anything for granted, but I feel confident that in a few months we'll be having a big swearing in, and I'm going to insist on a community swearing in too for former Secretary of Labor, former Congresswoman, soon to be Board of Supervisors, Hilda Solis. Thank you.
That was a very nice acknowledgement. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Karen Bass. In my language, she's a comadre. You know what I mean? She is a girlfriend, she is a leader, and she has a voice that's very strong that needs to be heard all the time. And when I'm so proud that now that I'm back home, when I turn on MSNBC or C-SPAN, guess who I see? My favorite people, both she and Congressman Jim McDermott, who you'll hear from as well. I'm just so happy that he is here as well. But I also want to take this time and thank Conway Collis, also for Grace Ministries, and all the folks here, the advocacy and strategy group, as well as all the other folks that are a part of this, the stakeholders and the other elected officials. Congressman Adam Schiff, who was here, who we served in the House, worked on these issues. And I understand that Sheila Kuehl in the back, the Assemblywoman, is former Assembly Speaker and Assemblywoman and Senator, is here and also probably has information to share about her new opportunity also with the Board of Supervisors. So we're glad to see you here, Sheila. And also very excited to hear about John Burton, who I understand, the former pro tem of the Senate, who I got to serve with. I just want to tell you what a delight it is to be here. This is a wonderful opportunity to talk about what we need to do to help meet the challenges. And just in the last 20 minutes, listening to the panelists talk about some of the issues and challenges that we're facing in child welfare services reminds me of where I started back in my days as an Assembly member back in 1992 and serving under then Speaker Willie Brown. Everyone knows Willie Brown. And I'll never forget a conversation that I had, if I could just share this with you. We were going through committee assignments, and at that time, most of the new, we call them new Turks that come in, want to serve on these prestigious committees. Well, it isn't that easy to get on all those committees. And I wanted to serve on the, well, I think it was the Welfare Committee. And he gave me this really strange look, like, you got to be kidding me. You know, that's a lot of work. And, you know, it's not all that, I'm not going to quote him, but it's not all that prestigious. And at the time, Tom Bates, the Assemblyman, was chair of that committee. But I didn't think about it in that way. I thought about my district. I thought about the Assembly district that I represented, that much like Karen Bass's district was going through a lot of challenges back in the 90s, high unemployment, a lot of poverty, young people falling into behavior that would affect them for a lifetime, and families that were struggling. And I grew up right here in the San Gabriel Valley and lived and saw that happen to many of our neighbors in our community, and felt that that's why I was elected, to be a voice, to represent the voiceless. And so I carry those kinds of feelings with me even now, even as a former Secretary of Labor. But I'm reminded how important this work is, and that it really is about lifting families. And I'm sorry I missed that first panel that talked about families and the need to have them better integrated into all of our systems of care here, and that we empower them because of the changing demographics and because of the fact that we're just crawling out of this economic hardship. And I don't say that lightly, because there are a lot of people that are doing better now as a fact, because we've done so much through the Congress and the President to help put people back on their feet, getting new jobs, and jobs that still may not be at the same level that we would all like to see. We lost 8.5 million private sector jobs, and there were a lot of families that were hurting across this country, and in particular, remember my district, where families were already experienced long before the recession was called, that there were 9 to 12% unemployment rates in little communities like El Monte, South El Monte, Baldwin Park, and places that you don't really hear about or read about in the LA Times or anywhere else. Nevertheless, these are all families that were hurting, and they still continue to hurt. And what I see happening now is that as we start to repair ourselves and we're starting to see more funding coming in to the federal, state, and local level of government, maybe not as much as we would like to see, is that now's an opportunity for us to focus in on how we coordinate all of our services. And it isn't strictly going to come from the federal government or the state or the local government. And it's going to come from nonprofits, it's going to come from our neighborhoods, it's going to come from people stepping up to the plate. And I think a lot of it is our responsibility to make sure that we really do make a difference here, that we really try to lift up these voices of these young people, the young people in foster care, and those that might be on the verge of foster care, and even those young children that are now in homes where perhaps no one is listening to their voice. No school official, maybe that social worker may not be paying as close attention because their caseload is enormous. We need to fix the system. There's no reason why one child should have to lose a life. And we should be able to prevent that. And we all have to take responsibility for that. So whether we make a difference now or later, the time has come for us to work now. Oftentimes, these children that go through this trauma in their lives are misunderstood, their families are, and people forget about them. They don't want to talk about it. And especially in immigrant communities like mine, where I grew up, we view it as something that it's our problem. We can't talk about it to other people because there's somehow shame associated with that. Well, we have to bring that barrier down, and we have to talk more openly, and we have to hire and attract people who will not be afraid to challenge each other and talk about these issues openly, and sometimes to the point where you may offend somebody, but it's for the right reason, and it's for hopefully repetition, getting the information out again and again and again in different languages and in different methods of service. So I'm a big believer in that. I remember very distinctly when I was in the state senate working on new innovative models. And one that came to mind was we have an enormous amount of talent in our communities, in our families, our grandparents, who also now are taking on that role much more heavily now, weighing in and helping with foster care. And we still have to do more, and we have to compensate people appropriately, because that should not be at the bottom of the pay scale. We're talking about transforming lives here. And society will pay, as we are paying now, if we don't make those changes. So we have to do that. We have to also lift up the folks that want to engage and want to be attracted to these professions. I know there's a lot of progress that has been made, but we need to do more. And I am looking at this new opportunity myself. As I look at the county, LA County is enormous, enormous. People need to talk to each other. Agencies and divisions need to break down those silos and start talking with each other, whether it's the law enforcement, the court system, the educational system. If we don't do something to help change and reform the way we even treat these young men and women, young foster care children, and we don't train them appropriately, we're going to be missing out. And I'm a big believer now, having served 4 years at the Department of Labor, how essential it is that these young people whether they leave our systems and they hopefully get a GED or a high school degree, that we continue to give them the skills that they need to be successful. And that means getting a job and having that ability to be able to show to themselves that they are empowered and that there's respect and dignity with all of that, and why it's important, because it's going to cost us less in the long run if we do it. And it takes an investment, and it takes good people to be attracted to these kinds of jobs. So I'm hoping that we can all work together. There's enough trauma that has already been experienced by these young people and their families. And when you take someone out and you put them in a foreign situation or a foreign environment that may not be as nurturing, those are challenges. And we've got to ask questions. What can we do to make it better? How do we provide that safety net? How do we make sure that it's nurturing, that it's loving, and that it really is meaningful for that child's experience? Because we all pay for it. And so I'm hopeful that in the long term we can start looking at some reforms. I'm a big advocate for technology that's useful. I'm not for seeing procedures put in place that are going to bog down the system. I'm all for performance review, but make sure that you're not burdening people so that the paperwork takes over the reality instead of the quality of service. It's actually going to make a difference for young people. So I think tools, high tech, being able to have all that available, there's no reason why that shouldn't be provided now. More social workers, more people in these different areas. We need to attract diversity as well and make sure that that's nurturing. I don't think I'm saying anything new to you all, because you are a part of the chorus. You all understand how important it is. And for us to work across county lines, and we look at this issue in a regional fashion as well. Because what works maybe well in some other county, maybe we ought to be looking at how to emulate those practices and test it. There's nothing wrong with that, and taking some risks. So I'm a big believer in that, but I'm also a big believer that we can't just throw money at a problem, that we have to have some safeguards, monitoring, and feedback. Feedback is essential, whether it's with the client, with the child, with the parent, or with the caregiver, whoever it might be. Everyone can stand to learn from that. So I'm hopeful that what is starting here today will continue on in other parts of our community in LA County and other parts of the state. I'm looking forward to hearing from other individuals that are here, and delighted to be back home. I want to tell you that the folks in this room have a wealth of experience, and we ought to be able to tap into all of that. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you and with the Congresswoman Karen Bass, and also with Jim McDermott and all the players, and of course all the caregivers that are here. We are all stakeholders. And while I understand that there are some former foster youth that are now adults that are working in this profession, your voices have to be heard, because you are an example of how we can fix this system. So I applaud all of you. Thank you for having me here and giving a brief comment. Thank you.